What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Dolphins In Depth podcast. I'm Daniel Oyefusi. Thanks so much for tuning in. Quick reminder before we start, make sure to subscribe to the Miami Herald YouTube page, like, share, comment, as well as subscribe to the Miami Herald newspaper along with that. Now, we are back as we take our trip around the AFC East to take a look at the Dolphins division rivals. AFC East, the AFC Beast, whatever you want to call it, is shaping up to be a very competitive conference. Last time we checked in, we took a look at the New York Jets, who are bringing in Aaron Rodgers to try to elevate that team to championship contention. But now this week, we're going to talk about the team that has been in championship contention the past couple of years in the division, and that is the Buffalo Bills. And to do that, I have brought along today Muki Hawkins, sports director of 96.5 radio in Woolfolk, New York. Muki, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. This is like the 4th of July Eve, if you
Yeah,
will. So here it is. We're chopping it up about sports. So I'm good.
yeah, most definitely. I gotta say, so we crossed paths first at the combine in Indy, and it felt like every time I went to a player's booth or table, you were there too. So I know you know ball. I know you got an eye for talent. So I'm excited to get into it. And we're gonna start with the team that you know best, the Buffalo Bills. And we got to start with the elephant in the room. The last time we heard about the Buffalo Bills before teams broke out for it's kind of summer break, end of offseason workout program. Bills had a little bit of drama going on. You had the start of OTAs, no longer voluntary but mandatory, and all players were accounted for except for one wide receiver, Stefon Diggs. Reporters spoke to head coach Sean McDermott. He said he was very concerned about the absence. So when you hear very concerned from the head coach, it's a fire alarm. Everyone's like, all right, what's going on? There seemed to be some type of confusion with Stefon, the organization, his agent. He was there the next day, but afterwards, I believe the final day of OTAs was canceled. So kind of an ominous ending to OTAs. We know that the Bill season didn't conclude the way they expected. A tough loss in front of their home crowd to the Bengals, and Diggs, didn't speak to reporters afterwards. So Josh Allen, he spoke after that first practice as well, saying that there's some things that they got to clear up. But it seems like McDermott tried to, drown out the smoke, drown out the fire, and he said we're all good. But what was your takeaway and your kind of perception of everything that happened over the course of a couple of confusing days?
It wasn't good. It shows that they're not on the same page, obviously. You know what I mean? That's what it definitely showed. I mean, me personally, Coach McDermott was in his feelings. He was in his feelings. Whatever him and Steph talked about, because he was there Tuesday. He was there for mandatory. He reported it within his contract. He came. But whatever possessed Coach McDermott to say what he said, obviously he had to be in his feelings for him to say that Stefon Diggs wasn't there. He wasn't unaccounted for, and he's not at camp when good goddamn well he was, right? For
Yeah.
you to come out and say that it was an excused absence the next day, therefore reiterating the point that, yeah, Steph was there. So you had to be in your feelings Friday. Steph was in his feelings too, because obviously he walked off. He left the facility, didn't practice on the first day of mandatory OTAs. Coach McDermott was in his feelings, and he kind of created this beast of why Stefon Diggs isn't here. He's not there when he's there. So, and that if I'm Steph Diggs, I got some trust issues with that. It's like kind of you like throwing my player under the bus for what? And he was here, right? So how would you backtrack to say that it was an excused absence to be continued? But my guy, I rock with Steph. I feel that
He's a Maryland guy, so and I'm a Maryland guy too. University of Maryland, go Terps. So
you
I'm
know what I
I'm
mean.
I'm siding with Steph too.
So yeah, I'm a Steph guy, and I'm a coach as well. So I see some things. Even though you are a good ass team, doesn't necessarily means that there's not going to be any issues. There's not going to be any friction, right?
Yeah.
So it's been friction throughout the season. If you can go all the way back to the Cleveland game, where it is Stefon Diggs on the sideline, having a one-on-one with Coach McDermott, like, hey man, we're losing to Cleveland. I haven't touched the ball in a quarter and a half. What's going on? You know what I mean? So to me, that's where it really began. And then it materialized, during the course of the season all the way until, the Miami game, Steph really, he don't really talk to too many people, right? He don't really talk to the media, right? But, me and him, we chop it up from time to time. So after the Miami game, and, Steph blessed me with an exclusive interview. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but I got to hear it. It's win and go home time, big money time, big baller step up in big play situations today. I mean, dude, you had over just about 100 yards in that first half. How excited were you to go out there and contribute and make plays for your team, especially when they needed it?
I was happy. It was just like trying to get on the right page with my quarterback. I feel like it's real pivotal right now. We're trying to tread in the right direction. This game wasn't perfect, but there's no style points in this game right now. We're just trying to get wins, stack them, and move on to the next round. So we had a blessing to get another opportunity, trying to take full advantage.
You was just killing them in that first half. Was there anything they did in the second half that altered some things where,
Nah, not really. They didn't really do nothing. It was just, I guess we were trying to work some different stuff and, work with some other guys. So I really was just trying to, hone in on, continue to do my job, keep the positive energy going, and be there whenever they call my number.
No doubt. And I know sometimes it can be tough, when you doing what you're doing and the game is out of reach, and then all of a sudden the tear go another way.
Exactly. It's definitely tough on the mental, but what's up, big guy? All right, y'all. It's definitely tough on the mental. I just try to keep my head in it, try to figure out what's going on, and whatever's in the best interest of the team, I'm all for it. So, but definitely it is tough when you come out hot and then shit get a little cold. So just got to keep rolling.
Big picture, you move on to the next week. Not sure what your opponent is. How do you, take this one in, but focus on what's in store for next year?
It's a 24-hour rule in the regular season. It's a 12-hour rule in the playoffs. So as soon as we know our opponent, get a jump start, we're going to start figuring them out and start figuring out how we're going to beat them.
Appreciate you, my guy.
No doubt.
Good luck.
And this is after the playoff win in Buffalo over the Dolphins, yeah.
Right, over the Dolphins. So, that was it. That was the final straw. And that was the last. That's the last interview you ever heard. This is an exclusive. I didn't even put this out nowhere. Yeah. You know what I mean?
We got an exclusive on the Dolphins In Depth podcast. There we go.
So that's exclusive Stefon Diggs. That's his literally last interview, with the Bills after a game. Now, I got him again that Wednesday leading up, to the game. But to have some post-game stuff, that's the last official Steph Diggs interview of last season. So you got it first.
Hey. Come to the Dolphins In Depth podcast, you get exclusives. I appreciate it. But really to that point, that just speaks to the overall uncertainty and just kind of confusion of the situation, because you have people kind of speaking on Steph's behalf essentially, because you have, all the questions about him going to the coaches and his teammates, and he's not speaking for himself. Maybe now we're left to kind of deduce what he's trying to say from tweets, cryptic tweets. I don't even like doing that. But again, overall, it just adds to what's shaping up to be another very pivotal season for the Bills. They've been knocking on the door for the last couple of years. They won the division the last 3 years. They got to the AFC Championship the year before last, and the expectation was like, all right, you get Von Miller, it's time for you to take that next step. It's kind of the icing on the cake. Josh Allen is a MVP caliber quarterback, and you kind of regress in a sense, taking a step back. Instead of the championship round, you lose the divisional round, and kind of in embarrassing fashion in front of your home crowd. One thing that I don't want to say it was a surprise to me, maybe not to you and others in the Buffalo area, but about a week or two ago, not only did Sean McDermott, the head coach, but the GM Brandon Beane, they both got multiple year extensions tying them to the franchise, for the long haul. And to some, that was maybe a bit of a surprise, given the fact that obviously they've been ascending the past couple of years, but maybe entering what maybe on the outside is a make or break season. Was it a surprise to you, and what does that say about where that franchise is right now?
It was one surprise for me. Anytime when you can take a team from, not making it to the playoffs for 17 straight years and, make this team a Super Bowl contender that's still looking to get over the hump, they're not going anywhere. So this assures that they'll be here, especially with the new stadium being built, that, they will be around, when the stadium is ready to roll. So It's not a surprise for anybody here. It's just reiterating the point that, this team definitely has to get on the right track. Obviously, there has been some regressions into, Stefon Diggs' frustration. If you obviously seen that in the interview there, it has been some regression in the offense. And as good as this offense was last season, there was some obvious regression. There it is. Josh Allen, leading the league in turnovers inside the red zone, to the point where the first 5 years of the season, he's never threw an interception inside the red zone. You can't say that Stefon Diggs regressed, other than teams doubling him and offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey's inabilities to get him freed up, so you will. He can say, okay, he regressed in that area, but the numbers, Stefon Diggs is still one of the elite receivers in the NFL. Gabe Davis, some say he would regress, but he put up some of his best numbers in his career, right? But, there was some drops, late in the season. He's been dealing with some injuries. Everybody regressed under a new offensive coordinator. This offense definitely has regressed. But when you really look at the situation, like, this team really shouldn't have lost the game when you look at it, But there were some eyesore regression within the offense because of you having Ken Dorsey, who's been, play caller in his first year. So it's going to be obviously some regression there. And it showed late in the season, because the Bills just stayed even killed. They didn't get better and better and better as the season progressed. They stayed level here. They stayed right here. And that's how, Cincinnati was able to expose them very badly in the playoffs, because they didn't really adjust to what teams were doing to put a Band-Aid on it, to stop the bleeding, if you will, against this high-powered offensive team. Ken Dorsey's inability to adjust to certain situations definitely was exposed in the playoffs. So hopefully another year under his belt. And this is why, staff say he wants some decision making in the play calling. So how do you got a guy that's killing it in the first half, and all of a sudden you go somewhere else with the ball, and it's not what the Dolphins are doing? They're not doubling Diggs. They got two of the top corners in the NFL. They're not going to double Diggs, right? So why not? Why your star player is not touching the ball come playoff time? And you almost lose that game with a third string quarterback.
Yeah.
So this is clearly a frustration. If I was out there playing, I would be frustrated as well, because there's no way that a Super Bowl contending team should be losing at home with a third string quarterback. So it's some things that Ken Dorsey definitely have to fix, because Stefon Diggs is the one who's running those routes, and he's not getting open based upon that creativity and that design by an inexperienced offensive coordinator. So year two, some continuity going on. And I feel that Stefon Diggs should have some sort of input with the play calling. I mean, he's more seasoned than anybody on the offense, including Josh Allen. So if Josh Allen's opinion is valued, Stefon Diggs' opinion should be valued too. He just signed a 5-year extension, so they're in the bed to each other. It's a marriage that isn't going.
Yeah, they were talking about, people were kind of floating out trades. I'm like, hold up, they not trading him at all. You gotta look at the contract of that, the details of that contract. They were not gonna trade him, so I wasn't even entertaining that. But you make a good point about just the overall functioning of the offense. I think the loss of Brian Dable was one that maybe, like, we were kind of praising him for everything he was doing with Daniel Jones in New York. But I think we kind of had to also flip the script and say, hey, maybe that's the reason why the offense wasn't running as smoothly under year one of Ken Dorsey. So it's going to be interesting to see how he tries to evolve and grow as a play caller. One last thing I want to ask you before we get to a short break, and then really talk about how the Bills match up with the Dolphins, vice versa. Obviously, we all remember the scary incident with Damar Hamlin in Cincinnati in January, suffering cardiac arrest, had to receive, honestly be resuscitated and be brought back to life right there. It's a miracle, it's a blessing, and he's not only has that been such a miracle and a blessing, but what he's done in the aftermath of it, really being philanthropic, going out of his way to try to bring medical devices to those that need it, and really spread awareness about this. He was cleared to return to football activities about maybe 2 months ago or so. Can you just kind of provide an update on where he is and where he kind of factors in with the team? Obviously, they got Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde coming back. I know they signed Taylor Rapp, but how is he doing, and where does he kind of factor in with the team this upcoming season?
Man, God is good, isn't he? He's out there, like, you figure something like that would have never happened if you just watch him just practice and participate. Obviously, the Bills are going to definitely take their time with that. They're not going to rush him back to no extent of the imagination. His rookie contract has been guaranteed by the NFLPA, so it's really no rush on getting him really back out there. I'm quite sure that the Bills are going to go to every type of medical measure to make sure that he's, suited up and ready to go before he get that okay. But he's been defying the odds. I mean, he's been cleared to go. I mean, he got his helmet out there. He had a few contact situations, no issues, so we just have to wait and see when the pads and stuff come on. Where would they go? Like, will he be on the PUP? Will you have a non-contact? That's when you really see where they truly are in reference to Damar Hamlin's situation and him getting back out there on the field. But right now, everything looks pretty good. His conditioning is up to par. His reaction, getting to the ball, making plays is 100%. So he looks like them. Actually, he looks a little bit more sharper. If you kind of ask me, he looks a little bit more sharper. But we'll see once the pads come on, how that materializes with Damar Hamlin. But it's absolute blessing for him just to be back out there. Very inspirational, and what he's doing in the community, throughout across the country, making awareness on AEDs and CPR. I mean, we just had one recently a couple of weeks ago at the old Rock Power where the Bills used to play, and the Bills had an awesome layout. All the rookies came out, and the community came out. So Chasing M's, man, is doing phenomenal things. And
the money it's been raising and pouring it back to the community. That's amazing. That's a real example of just taking what really could have been a tragic situation and turning it into the best possible thing. So again, football was put on the back burner. That was an afterthought for so long, but now that he has been cleared by the medical officials, it is great to see him back on the field, and again continuing to get back to the community and pay it forward. So that's awesome. All right, we're gonna take a short break, but when we come back on the other side of things, Dolphins, Bills, they faced off 3 times. Each time it came down to the wire. But is this the year that the Dolphins supplant Buffalo for AFC supremacy? We're going to talk about that and more. Stay locked with us, and we'll be back soon. What's going on, everybody? Still here on the Dolphins In Depth podcast with Muki Hawkins, talking all things Dolphins and Bills as we take our trip around the AFC East. Now, in the first half, we're talking about a lot of Bill-specific points, what's going on with Stefon Diggs, the overall state of the franchise and the team after coming up short in the Super Bowl and I gotta say, like, we didn't really emphasize it as much in the first half, but this was a team that entering the previous season, they were the betting favorites. So it's not like, they were kind of one of the teams in the mix. No, this was a team that was, entering the season favored in majority of their games. They were expected to represent the AFC, and they don't even get back to the championship game. Maybe a little bit of cause of concern. And now you look at the rest of the AFC East. You got the Dolphins, they retained most of their squad, and then they added Jalen Ramsey. You got the Jets, as I said before, they added Aaron Rodgers. And obviously, a lot of people are kind of not really paying too much attention to the Patriots, but they've always been competent. They've always been in the mix. They're always going to be a hard out. I mean, we even saw it in the final game of the regular season, when I think the Dolphins, needed the Bills to win, to beat the Patriots, to kind of confirm some of their playoff clinching scenarios. And the Patriots were giving them everything they could handle until the end of that game. So again, the Patriots, you can't count out New England for at least, giving up a good fight. But as you look at the AFC East, again, Buffalo's won the last 3 division titles. Has the gap officially been closed in the AFC East? Because for me, I've been saying it for several weeks, several months. I think the Dolphins have the most talent on paper. I'm not saying that they're the best team, but I think they have the most talent in the division. What do you think?
I would say, I give the Dolphins probably the most talent. They have more athletes. They are the most athletic team in the AFC East. I can say that. Talent, that varies, but athleticism, I'll give that to the Dolphins for sure. Yes, what the Bills have done the past 3 years forced teams like the Jets, the Dolphins, and including the Patriots to, try to do what's best to keep up with the Joneses, if you will. If you're not going to be able to compete with the Bills with mediocrity or mediocre play at cornerback. You're not going to be able to compete with the Bills if you can't fight fire with fire. So what do? They go out and get speed in Tyreek Hill, a guy who's been a thorn in the Bills' side the past 3 years, kept him out of the Super Bowl. Dolphins go nab him. They go and get help. They bring in a guy like Jalen Ramsey, who's top 5 that are alive at his position. So yes, they have got better, but the Bills have got sneaky good too. And like you said before,
go ahead. I was gonna say, because it wasn't a splashy offseason compared to the previous one when they got Von Miller. Because I wanted to ask, like, what are some? I know they added Leonard Fournette, but what are some moves that maybe are kind of going under the radar that from the outside that we aren't aware of? Because on paper, it doesn't seem like the Bills did a ton in the offseason, but what would you say?
We did it. We did enough. We did enough. I mean, first I call it minor upgrades, right? I call it minor upgrades. We replace Isaiah McKenzie with a Deion Hardy. We replace a Jake Kumaro with a Trent Sherfield, who's from Miami, right? So we've Khalil Shakur has gotten better. We drafted Justin Shorter, a big, rangy wide receiver for Josh with a great catch radius. We drafted Dalton Kincaid, some say who was the best receiver in this year's draft, whether a receiver or tight end. So we still have Dawson Knox. Gabe Davis in his contract year, and obviously one of the best receivers in the NFL, and Stefon Diggs. On the running back portion, we've replaced Devin Singletary with Damian Harris, a guy who's familiar with the AFC East and especially with the Patriots. He played there, know all about that system. So, and we picked up Latavius Murray and James Cook in his second year. Once we take the training wheels off him, we should be okay. The Bills have revamped their offensive line up front.
Drafted somebody early.
Yeah, we Quentin Osiris fell in our laps in the second round. So we got him. We got Nick Brodericker. You got 2 guys that was all SEC who really didn't allow any sacks. So if you're not giving up sacks in the SEC, and you're playing Alabama and Georgia and LSU, and you ain't giving up no sacks, I like those picks as well. So they brought in Connor McGovern as well in the free agency. So this team has got sneaky good. You say you pick up Leonard Floyd, you pick up Tyler Rapp on the flip side of that. You bring in Apuna Ford, who's a run stopper. So we didn't lose too many people off this Super Bowl roster that was the favorite last year, right? Yeah. So if the Bills were the favorite last year with the roster that they had last year, to me, this roster is better than last year's roster.
Really?
So I say the same rule apply. I mean, everybody in the division has gotten better. We'll just see how the continuity and the familiarity, may win a few ball games here and there. So we'll just have to see with another year under Coach Dorsey's belt, the growth of this offense and how they evolved. Will they bring a little bit more balance, attack with the run game to help Josh out, because Josh can't be, shoulder and load being your quarterback and running back. That's just not going to fly. So I think that this Bills team has gotten better, and they have a better roster than last year's Super Bowl favorite team. So
that's interesting.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to say one thing that stood out to me that it really just came to mind, like, a couple of days ago, and I was kind of looking at the roster because, as well as doing, these podcasts, I've also been doing AFC East previews for the website where, I break down each position group and, kind of just do the outlook. And one thing that I forgot is that the defense specifically had several injuries to key guys, whether it was guys returning from injuries like a Tre'Davious White or players that were just lost during the season. Von Miller, going down with the ACL. You had Micah Hyde, who only played in, I think, 2 games because of the neck injury. Jordan Poyer was banged up in and out of the lineup. So how much do you think that hurt them last year, and how much do you think having those vets back and maybe Tre'Davious kind of getting his legs under him, how much do you think that will assist this defense in 2022?
It'll definitely assist us. I mean, especially on the back end, as far as communication. I mean, you do, have a big void with Tremaine Edmonds not being there. But I think that Coach McDermott, who's now calling the plays because Leslie Frazier has gone, I think you're going to see a much more aggressive defense with veteran leadership, with 2 All-Pros back there, with Poyer and Hyde being back, being healthy, Tre'Davious being 100% healthy. You got 2 star rookie corners. Well, they're not rookies anymore, but you got Kyer Elam and Christian Benford, 2 6'2" corners that'll be back in the second year. They got picked up Cameron Dantzler, So the Bills been sneaky good. This is probably the most competitive roster in the Bean McDermott era, and I'm really excited to see how it's going to pan out. I think they're going to compensate with the loss of Tremaine Edmonds by being a little bit more aggressive. So you'll see some more blitzing than normal than last year. 75% of the time the Bills had a soft box. I don't think that's going to happen this year.
Yeah, so also the coaching change was something that was just kind of interesting to me because at first it was Leslie Frazier kind of doing a sabbatical, and then news kind of came out before that. Afterward, that maybe it was more of a disagreement on the way to go, and McDermott kind of wanted to take more of the reins in that. It seemed like especially over the past several years. Frazier led some of the best defenses in the league. I think that they were number one in 2021, if I'm not correct. But why did it seem like now there needed to be that change?
Well, I just think that it's just the overall growing pains of one. Leslie Frazier should have been a head coach candidate a long time ago. I'm not sure why. Well, I know why. He's not a head coach, so he should be a head coach somewhere. So those are one of the frustrations, and then two. Hey, when you got a microscope on you, nobody want to come to work with a microscope on. You know what I mean? So he's done an outstanding job for it to have that type of microscope on him since he's been here as the DC, and for him to perform and put up top 5 defenses year in and year out. That's a lot of pressure from one guy. So I'll say that I wish Coach Frazier nothing but the best. And I hope that he can, land a head coaching job very, very quickly. He would definitely be missed here. But again, I think Coach McDermott just got that itch. When you're a defensive coordinator and you get the head coaching position, you still, get that feeling that you want to call plays. So, and he's a young guy. It's not like he's an older guy and he's designating that to somebody else. When you're young like that, you still got that edge to, want to call plays, even though I am the head coach. But I still feel that, I can do this, especially with the type of players that, I want to bring in, because this is my baby. I'm the head coach of this team. So I got carte blanche right now. So he's like a kid in the candy store, if you will, Coach McDermott. So again, I'll see that the Bills will be a little bit more aggressive. You see a lot more blitzing. You got Matt Milano, who's still there. He's coming off an All-Pro year. So I think that this team will be more aggressive than, Leslie Frazier's defense that was top ranked the past 3 years.
You say more aggressive, more blitzing. I'm thinking about how that matches up with the Dolphins, and I'm like, I don't know if that's the way to go for that matchup. I don't know if you want to blitz against the Dolphins with those guys. What do you think about that?
Well, you got to do something. You can't sit around and play passive aggressive defense. You can't be, playing 10 yards off when it's 3rd and 3. You can't be doing that. So they got to find a way to, be a little bit more aggressive. I think that Kyer Elam, played Tyreek Hill quite well, especially that first game. Second game, it wasn't bad neither, but it's the scheme of things. They have to get after the quarterback. And, it's going to be quite interesting when Von Miller returns and you got Leonard Floyd at your disposal. What's going to happen let's say if it's a 3rd and long situation, Greg Rousseau, I feel that probably move inside.
Yeah.
So you got Greg Rousseau, you got Leonard Floyd, you got Von Miller, and you could put anybody else you want to put in there. You want to put Jordan Phillips, you want to put Ed Oliver in there. Go right ahead. Me, I like the big guys, so I'll probably go with Jordan Phillips, who's 6'5", 330. You put him right next to Greg Rousseau, who's damn near 6'8". You got Von Miller and Leonard Floyd coming at you. Quarterback, you got to step up into a Rousseau who's 6'8" with that length, and a Jordan Phillips with a motor too. So, we got to apply pressure to quarterbacks. That's how you're able to, check Tyreek Hill one-on-one sometimes.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, I know he got one up. I know he got one on Tre'Davious in that second game. But it is interesting because we saw in the first half of that year, especially when Tua came back from the first concussion, they really started to hit their groove. It's like nobody had an answer for those two guys, Hill and Jalen Waddle. I think over the course of the entire season, the Dolphins saw the highest amount rates of zone because teams just did not want to play man to man. And then you saw when they started to kind of get tripped up in the later part of the season, you saw some different stuff. And I think It's interesting to see the way this matchup is going to be, in year two of the Mike McDaniel era with the Bills and the Dolphins to see what they do. Because we saw in the San Francisco 49ers game that broke their win streak, their 5-game win streak, we saw like the linebackers have a really big role in getting depth, kind of closing those windows. And then the defensive front was able to get the pressure that you're talking about. And then the next week against the Chargers, they kind of flip the game plan where the cornerbacks were a little more aggressive. So I think that, it's going to be interesting because I think Buffalo can do a little bit of both. Obviously, if Tre'Davious White is back to that, that all-pro form that we've seen in the previous seasons, or they have somebody who can, keep up with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. And then you have the potential makings of a really deep defensive front. I really do like that defensive line as well. Like I said, whenever Vaughn comes back, if I know he's 34, but he was looking really good before the ACL last year. You had Leonard Floyd, he's had 9 sacks the past 3 years. Greg Rousseau, who's a Miami guy, like Jalen Phillips. I mean, he had a good second season as well. So you have the potential matchups there, and then again in the back end, if if healthy, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, arguably the best safety duo. So I think, like you say, there might be more blitzing, but it's going to be interesting to see what they do in that Miami matchup because I think that they have the makings to do a lot of different things. You can't just play man the entire game against the Dolphins. They're going to cook you at some point. But again, it's going to be interesting to see the chess match because again, though every single game was competitive in its own right, and we had like different. Every game was kind of unique in its own way. Like you had the first matchup where you had 105 degrees on the field. The Dolphins never had the ball, but they still come out with a 2-point win at the very last second. You got the second one where we're expecting a blizzard, and then it doesn't come until like the last 5 minutes of the game, and then Josh Allen takes over, and then you had the third game too is not there. But I don't even know how to describe that game because it looked like we're ready headed to a blowout, and then the Dolphins somehow, I mean, really with their defense, they get back in the game. But I mean, it's like that gradual progression. I mean, the the Bills got their quarterback, they got their coach, and they kind of had that vision, and they put it into motion. And then the Dolphins were kind of a year or two behind, finding their quarterback, getting things right with Tua. But again, I mean, if I feel like if last year proved anything, it said, all right, the Dolphins can compete because they get lost like I don't even know how many. I remember I was writing about it. They lost like 3, 4, 5 straight years, just getting swept, not being competitive with them. I think after the first time they played Josh Allen, after that, the next 3, 4 years, he had beaten them. So the fact that they're able to get a game on them and then be competitive without two in the playoffs, I think that if last year showed anything, it's that hey, the Dolphins are right there. And again, I don't know, maybe I know Buffalo people watching this or listening will say it's the Miami homerism or whatever, the Miami bias, but I do think that the rosters stack up, considerably. And, if you ask me, you put my foot to the fire, I say the Dolphins are probably a little bit better just in terms of talent on paper. So it's going to be interesting to see how what happens with those matchups.
Yeah, well, I mean, Coach McDaniel, that's my guy. Carmine, I felt the new respect for Coach McDaniel there, and he coaches his ass off though. He coaches a younger guy. He speaks their language, and hey, the players gonna go all out for him. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do, as a coach year 2 as well, because Miami goes how he goes. And, he's definitely made his mark in his first year. So I was quite impressed to see, here it is. He's not a football guy. He went to Yale and all that stuff, but you wouldn't think so.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that, I feel like because we only knew so much about him, when he was first hired on. We saw the kind of funny press conferences, and we knew he was a young guy, we knew he was a relatable guy, we knew he was a smart guy. But the way I feel like one of the most underrated parts of, maybe things that don't get talked about enough from last season, but just how he kind of kept everything, he kept a tight ship. There were a lot of times last year where I think that things could have, went haywire. They had a couple losing streaks. Tua was out twice, the whole concussion scandal issue, whatever you want to call it. And you didn't hear any leaks. You didn't hear guys complaining, saying we got to do this, that, the third. And he would jump in front of a lot of issues and take accountability. We talked about, Ken Dorsey, what he has to do to grow, what Sean McDermott might do calling defensive plays now. But McDaniel was, one of the first guys to come out and say, hey, I'm not running the ball enough. I got to call the plays better. I got to put the players in better position. So that really impressed me. And that all kind of leads me into one of my last points. I was going to ask, what do the Bills need to do to get over the hump in 2023. And I was gonna say I feel like it's the same for the Dolphins because I feel like making both of their offenses more balanced and less reliant or dependent on their start players is what's the key for both of them. Because you talk about you mentioned it before, the offense goes as Josh Allen goes, but maybe it's a little too dependent on him. Sometimes the running game, just standard handoffs, isn't there as often. You're not only relying on Josh Allen to throw the ball but run the ball, which he can do, but sometimes you kind of want to take that pressure off of him to have to produce. And on the flip side with the Dolphins, obviously this offense is going to go as far as Tua goes, and kind of by proxy, it's going to go as far as Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Cook goes because he's throwing to them a lot. But if they can find that balance, they might get Dalvin Cook. He's waiting. He seems like he wants to come to Miami, but the money's got to be right. So if the money's right, or maybe I don't know if the money's right, I think he'll be here. But if not, maybe he just says I want to play for my hometown team. If he comes into the fold, then you got a really balanced offense. I'm not the biggest proponent of like they have to sign him, me personally. But if he does come, obviously that takes a lot of pressure off of Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and kind of by affect Tua. But on your end, looking at the Bills, what do they need to do to take that next step?
Just the same thing you said. Get Josh Allen ass up under center, run the football, and utilize run action. I mean, when they did run the ball, they went bad. I mean, I had to ask Coach Dorsey in pressers like, Coach, you struggle in short yard situation. How do you struggle in short yard situations when you have two running backs that average over 5 yards a carry? Couldn't answer that question to me.
That sounds kind of like the Dolphins, because the Dolphins didn't have great team raw numbers, but you look at Mostert, you look at Jeff Wilson, those guys were averaging 4.7. The offensive line isn't great for the Dolphins. I'll admit that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you got guys averaging close to 5 yards a pop, it doesn't make sense. Like the Dolphins were like the worst short yardage offense at all. I mean, in the NFL, because they just couldn't run it all. So it's weird how similar these teams are with some of their offensive issues.
I mean, when you look at it, Josh Allen, when he got drafted, he wasn't this elite passer that he is now. He had the potential, he had the upside to be that, right? So Josh was going to come in to be an elite game manager. That's why you brought in Frank Gore. That's why you had Shane McCoy. That's why they drafted Devin Singletary. A more power controlled run that now, you got run action coming off that power run that sets up your pass. The addition of Stefon Diggs changed that dynamic, to where, they went away from a more power gap team to a more zone run team. And, that opened things up, in the passing game, because they were more spread than anything using RPOs. That's why you saw Zach Moss being drafted the very next year. Didn't really pan out with that scenario. Then you have offensive line issues. We got run blockers, but we're trying to pass block all the time. So didn't mix and match with the offensive line last year. You got Roger Saffold, who is a running back guru, goofy monster, but we got him pass blocking, 80% of the time. It's just not conducive to what he does as a player. It doesn't fit his strong suit. So Bills had to figure that one out. I mean, everybody want to talk about how bad the Bills line were, but hey, you had two running backs that averaged over 5 yards a carry. You had a 4,000 passer. Half of your line made it to the damn Pro Bowl. So they really couldn't have been that bad. It all falls again on Coach Dorsey, his inability to have the right play calls at the right situations. I mean, you lose a game to the Minnesota Vikings, 2nd and 2, you can't convert. 3rd and 2, you can't convert. 4th and 2, you get the ball picked off, where you could have just kicked the field goal and avoided everything that you encountered during the rest of that game and lose 33-30. That game cost you the number 1 seed. So It's a lot of things to where the Bills were winning every game. It's just that, to me, it seemed like they just overdid it trying to win it twice. Like if you, for instance, like the Miami game, right? They're blowing Miami out. All of a sudden, Miami comes back.
Couple turnovers.
Because why? Because you're passing the ball and you have a comfortable lead. The cowards always say, run the football when you up. Control the game. Kill the clock. Why are we passing the damn football? To allow the other team to come back in the game, and then all of a sudden we got to make a miraculous drive to win it. That's why I say the Bills, is just really making it hard on themselves, especially the second half of the season, because you had to win the damn game twice because you refused to run the ball. You were losing to the Chicago Bears till you started running the ball. You had two running backs that damn near went over 100 yards. We didn't see those run. We didn't see the Bills run the ball no more the rest of the season. Why is that? They played New England. Probably the most complete game when they played New England. They emphasized the run that Thursday night against New England. And that's when you saw complimentary football at its best on all three phases. Other than that, I didn't really see the Bills put too many complete games together where you thought offense, defense, special team was kicking on all cylinders. The New England game on the road on Thursday night was probably the best. And that was like a 27-17 game, but the Bills dominated the game. We didn't see too much of that in the second half of the season for this Bills team. So hopefully they can, pick up where they left off in certain areas and get better in the areas where they regressed.
Yeah, we talk so much about players that need to step up, take a step forward. But I think a real big part of what decides this division is going to be the impact and the growth of the various, whether you want to say head coaches and coordinators, for the Dolphins and the Bills on both sides of the ball. You got the growth of McDaniel, second year as a head coach, play caller. You got Vic Fangio. Everybody talked about him, but that's going to be a completely different defensive scheme, defensive philosophy that he brings to that team. And then on the Bills side, the growth of Ken Dorsey and then Sean McDermott taking over the defensive play calls and what that can mean for that philosophy. So we talk a lot about the players. But the coaches will have a big impact on that as well. One last question, because we haven't got it definitively from you before we get out. Right now it's early. We still got I believe 15 days until the Dolphins rookies report, and then another week before the vets come up and we start. But right now, I'm looking at the AFC and I think it'll be Dolphins, Bills, Jets, Patriots, and I think that those top three teams will all be in the mix, for clinching a playoff spot. What is it looking like from your perspective right now in the AFC East?
I would say, let me just follow up on your last question. To win the Super Bowl, you got to run the ball, right? If you would have told me that Patrick Mahomes would have threw for 187 yards in the Super Bowl and they would have won,
I would have thought they would have got blown out.
They would have got blown out, right? That's my point exactly. They focused on the run. Patrick Mahomes, 187. He was efficient with 3 touchdown passes, but the run game helped put that together. So you have to be able to run the football if you want to win a Super Bowl. I have not seen too many teams throw the ball all over the yard to win it. The Rams is probably the only team in the past 6 years that just threw the ball all over the yard and won the game, right? You got to be able to run the ball to win a Super Bowl. So hopefully Ken Dorsey can get the memo and have at it to have a little bit more balance in his offense. That's easy, man. I mean, the Bills been nobody's been in front of the Bills the past 3 years. So until somebody beats the Bills for the division, then the Bills are still top dog. You know what I mean? It's just like what everybody was chasing New England, right? So you knock New England off the top, and New England is still on the top. I get it. I like the roster moves from all teams. The Bills caused this madness. The Bills made everybody, be great. or just be a doormat for the Bills if you don't, force the action, if you will. So the Bills force these teams to go out and get perennial all-stars to fight fire with fire, and that's why you have a more competitive AFC East. But until a team has a better divisional record than the Buffalo Bills, they still number one. They still the beast of the East, baby. And it's going to be loaded because the NFC East is just as beastie, right? So, man, it's going to be one hell of a season. I'm excited. I can't wait to see, the new changes and the acquisitions and how pivotal these teams can be, these players can be for their new teams. But right now, Bills, Dolphins, Jets, Patriots.
Okay,
and you can't never count Patriots out because of Bill Belichick. So it's going to be tough. It's not going to be like lopsided 1 through 4. You can easily get 3 teams. Yeah, you can get 3 teams out of the division to make the playoffs this year.
Oh, most definitely. I think that 1 to 4 will probably be separated by maybe like 3 games. Like if the division winner is 12-5. I think that the last place team might be like 9-8. It's just going to be that close. That's just how competitive it's going to be. So I'm rolling with the Dolphins right now. you said you got to see it to believe it first. You're rolling with the Bills. Regardless, it's going to be a fun season, a competitive division. And I appreciate you joining me to talk some Bills as we take our trip around the AFC East on the Dolphins In Depth podcast. So that brings us to the end of another edition of the Dolphins In Depth podcast. Once again, Muki Hawkins, thank you so much. We'll be back next week to continue our trip around the AFC East. We got one more team, New England Patriots. As Muki mentioned, they're hard out every year, but have they done enough to stay competitive in the division? We're going to talk about that and more. But until then, you guys enjoy your holiday, and we'll be back next week. Take care. Bye.
Go Bills.